Well, let's get more on this now. We're joined by John Fredericks, a Republican campaigner who hosts a conservative radio talk show, and he's joining us live from Washington, D.C. Very good to have you with us on Al Jazeera. And it's not just the Saudis who are being cautious in maintaining a narrative. The U.S. administration is doing the same thing. But will Jamal Khashoggi's fiance's moving speech, do you think, put any pressure on the Trump administration?
No. Elizabeth, it was a great speech, but the president has taken no position on this. So to say that he has not done enough, he's not done anything right now because all the information is not in. We don't know what the conversation was between himself and Gina Haspel. Here's what we do know. The president said if indeed he is convinced that the Saudis engaged in premeditated murder inside the consulate, and certainly that Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman was knowledgeable of it, behind it, or in some way ordered it, he said there's going to be severe consequences. But all of the facts are not in. And so I think the bottom line is you got 8 days, Elizabeth, before a major U.S. election in the midterms that is really going to determine the further direction of the Trump agenda. Until that's over, there's absolutely no upside for this president to make any decisions on anything until after November the 6th is behind him.
Will this administration's handling of this situation, though, do you think, have any impact on the midterm elections or on the way people vote?
No, and it shouldn't, because, again, the president has not taken a position, nor has he outlined any of the consequences. We do know he said two things. One, there'll be severe consequences. We don't know yet what they are, Elizabeth. I'm sure that the president and his team will be evaluating that when all the evidence is in. Secondly, he said, regardless of the outcome, it's not going to jeopardize the $110 billion arms sales memorandum of understanding that the United States has with Saudi Arabia, because the president said, and rightly so, they're simply going to buy the arms from someone else. But there's so many other things on the table. There's sanctions, there's visas, there's freezing assets. There's also pulling all U.S. support from the Saudi Emirates coalition in the Yemeni civil war. That's on the table. And the final thing is, if it's traced back to MBS and the president is convinced that MBS either was not truthful with him or that he's just incompetent, that's going to certainly affect the entire relationship going forward. None of this, though, is going to be decided until after the midterms, which is only 8 days away.
And those options that you're mentioning that the administration are considering, so that's what Press House Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders was referring to about the different options in considering what action to take then.
Well, Elizabeth, I think there's a number of options on the table that the president is going to have to evaluate. I think after the midterms, regardless of the outcome, he's probably going to want to engage Congress in what the decision is in a bipartisan way. But you've got economic sanctions, you have pulling visas, you have freezing assets. And the biggest thing on the table is if the U.S. pulls their support of the Yemeni, of the Saudis' involvement in the Yemeni civil war, the Saudis can't fly an airplane. They're done. And so that is the most severe thing there is. And the president, in his campaign, talked about getting the United States out of that conflict. And when you look at the horrific circumstances of that war, the famine, the number of people dying, children starving every day, school buses being blown up, that's going to be the first thing on the chopping block. And it's going to be the end of Saudi's involvement there and could be the end of MBS.
Well, we'll wait and see. Mr. Fredericks, thank you for your time on this. That is John Fredericks joining us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.